Hello there, warm welcome to the programme. And we begin today with global military expenditure rising to a record high last year. Well, this is according to a report by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Now, the report says that this historic figure is a reflection of how insecure the world is amid heightened tensions across the world right now. Well, according to the report, the total global military expenditure for the year 2022 stands at $2,240 billion. This is a rise of 3.4% than what it stood at in 2021 in real terms. The sharpest rise in military spending has been seen in Europe, which has increased by 13%. Well, the expenditure in Central and Western Europe totaled $345 billion in 2022. Now, interestingly, such expenditure levels have not been seen in the continent since the Cold War. The rise in European defence expenditure, as you'd expect, is largely accounted for by Russian and Ukrainian spending. But many other countries in the continent have increased their spending either to supply weapons to Ukraine or due to fears of meeting the same fate as Ukraine. Well, let's zoom in on the specifics now then. So Russian military spending grew by an estimated 9.2% in 2022. It stands at $86.4 billion and is more than 4% of its GDP in 2022. On the other side, Ukraine's military spending reached $44 billion in 2022, with a rise of 640%. This is the highest single-year increase in a country's military expenditure ever recorded in this report. Well, coming to its ally then, the US. It remains the world's biggest military spender. Washington's military spending reached $877 billion in 2022. This is 39% of the total global military spending. Now, experts say that this rise is on the account of the military aid it's provided Ukraine. This aid is for the year of 2022, standing at nearly $20 billion. While China comes in at second place with an estimated expenditure of $292 billion, increasing its budget by 4.2% since 2021. Now, together, US, China and Russia account for 56% of the world's total. China's defense expenditure has been seeing an increase for 28 consecutive years. Well, to chew over these numbers with us now, we have more with a special guest joining us, Glenn Deason, Professor of International Relations from the University of Southeastern Norway, a specialist on Russian foreign policy and geopolitics as well from Oslo.
Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure to have you on. So just sort of looking at these numbers, they are sort of mind-boggling, enormous amounts spent on military and defence. But I suppose in some regard, a lot of it is to be expected.
Yeah, well, this is often what's referred to as the security dilemma, which is a dilemma in terms of how to enhance your own security. Because either you can reduce weapons, but then you will be vulnerable to external hostilities, or you can increase the amount of weapons you have, but this will then increase the insecurity among your rivals, and they will also need to acquire more weapons, so this will also make you less secure. So this is the problem we're at. Usually in times of peace, we're trying to disarm, but what we're seeing now is the world is moving towards a point where there doesn't seem to be any room for compromise anymore. It's an entire world order being challenged and undergoing change, and it's in this point where the world is changing. We're not anymore in the era of US global hegemony, but we haven't yet transitioned into a proper international system based on multipolarity either. And the different great powers are pulling in different direction, which is why the only solution any of these countries see is to essentially arm themselves to the teeth. And this is, of course, a very, very dangerous development when we consider security to derive solely from acquisition of more and more weapons.
Yeah, it is incredibly scary. And what is interesting is all of these economies, even if you tie in China in regards to the last sort of 3 decades, their economies aren't firing on all cylinders either. So it's so interesting that they managed to find all these billions in the first place.
Well, great powers will always seek to prioritize its survival, because if you do not survive, you will not have an economy either. So obviously, it's a huge drain on the economy, and it will slow down growth by diverting resources into the military. However, this is why economies can often stagnate during times of conflict, which can then lead to more instability, and then even creating more tensions and military conflict. So it's I certainly agree. It's a very scary development, and I think ideally we would have seen a lot of these solutions being a lot of these problems being solved through diplomacy. Instead, we see now that war and military power appears to be the main instrument that countries envision to solve their differences.
Yeah, quite right. Diplomacy, wouldn't that be an extraordinary thing? Thank you so much indeed for offering us your expertise here on WION today. We appreciate that. That's Glenn Deason there, Professor of International Relations from the University of Southeastern Norway. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.